Top 40 Most Unbelievable Survival Stories in the World. Survival stories have always fascinated us, serving as powerful reminders of the human capacity to endure unimaginable hardships. These tales span the globe, encompassing various scenarios where people found themselves on the brink of death, but managed to survive through a combination of willpower, ingenuity, and sometimes sheer luck. Here, we explore 40 of the most unbelievable survival stories ever recorded. Before moving forward, if you are new to our channel, please don't forget to like and subscribe our channel for future interesting videos. Number 1. Aaron Ralston, trapped in Blue John Canyon. Aaron Ralston's harrowing ordeal began on April 26, 2003, when he set out on a solo canyoneering adventure in Blue John Canyon, Utah. As he descended into a narrow slot canyon, a large boulder dislodged, pinning his right arm against the canyon wall. Ralston was trapped with no way to free himself and limited supplies. For 5 days, he tried everything from chipping away at the boulder with a pocket knife to attempting to rig a pulley system, all to no avail. As dehydration and delirium set in, Ralston realized his only chance of survival was to amputate his own arm. With a dull multi-tool, he performed the excruciating task, then rappelled down a 65-foot cliff and hiked for miles before being rescued. His story was later immortalized in the book Between a Rock and a Hard Place and the film 127 Hours. Number 2. The Miracle of the Andes, Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571. On October 13, 1972, Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571, carrying 45 passengers, mostly members of a rugby team, crashed in the Andes Mountains. The survivors were faced with extreme cold, altitude sickness, and the complete lack of food. For 10 days, they awaited rescue, but when none came, they were forced to make a horrific decision. To survive, they would have to eat the bodies of those who had perished in the crash. The group remained stranded for 72 days, battling avalanches and severe weather. Finally, 2 of the survivors, Nando Parado and Roberto Canessa, undertook a perilous 10-day trek across the mountains to find help. Their eventual rescue of the remaining 14 survivors is often referred to as the Miracle of the Andes. The story was captured in the best-selling book Alive and later adapted into a film of the same name. Number 3. Julianne Koepke, Falling from the Sky. Julianne Koepke's story is nothing short of miraculous. On Christmas Eve 1971, 17-year-old Koepke was aboard LANSA Flight 508, flying over the Peruvian rainforest when the plane was struck by lightning. The plane disintegrated mid-air, and Koepke, still strapped into her seat, fell approximately 10,000 feet into the dense jungle. Incredibly, she survived the fall with only minor injuries. Alone in the vast rainforest, Koepke relied on survival skills taught to her by her parents, both zoologists. She followed a stream, knowing it would eventually lead her to civilization. For 11 days, she battled hunger, exhaustion, and severe insect bites before stumbling upon a logging camp where she was rescued. Her story is a profound example of human resilience and was later told in the documentary Wings of Hope. Number 4. Stephen Callahan, Adrift at Sea. In 1981, Stephen Callahan embarked on a solo transatlantic crossing in his small sailboat, the Napoleon Solo. However, after just 6 days at sea, his boat struck something in the night and began to sink. Callahan managed to escape in an inflatable life raft, taking with him a small amount of food, water, and a solar still to generate fresh water. For 76 days, Callahan drifted 1,800 miles across the Atlantic Ocean. He survived by catching fish with improvised tools and rationing his limited supplies. Constantly exposed to the elements and harassed by sharks, Callahan faced near-death experiences daily. He was finally rescued by fishermen near the island of Marie Galante in the Caribbean. Callahan's account of his survival, Adrift. 76 Days Lost at Sea became a bestseller and a manual for survival at sea. Number 5. Hugh Glass, Mauled by a Bear. Hugh Glass was a frontiersman and fur trapper in the early 19th century, whose story became legendary for its sheer brutality and determination. In 1823, while on a fur trading expedition in South Dakota, Glass was attacked and severely mauled by a grizzly bear. His injuries were so severe that his companions, believing he wouldn't survive, left him behind with minimal supplies. Despite suffering from broken bones, deep lacerations, and infection, Glass refused to die. Over the next 6 weeks, he crawled more than 200 miles to the nearest settlement, surviving on wild berries and the occasional carcass left by wolves. His tale of survival was eventually adapted into the Academy Award-winning film The Revenant, starring Leonardo DiCaprio. Number 6. Joe Simpson and Simon Yates, Touching the Void. In 1985, British climbers Joe Simpson and Simon Yates set out to conquer the previously unclimbed west face of Ciudad Grande in the Peruvian Andes. After successfully reaching the summit, disaster struck during their descent. Simpson fell and broke his leg, leaving him immobile. Yates attempted to lower Simpson down the mountain using ropes, but in a desperate situation, he was forced to cut the rope when Simpson slipped over a cliff, leaving him to fall into a crevasse. Miraculously, Simpson survived the fall, and with his broken leg, spent 3 days crawling back to base camp without food or water. Yates, who had assumed his friend was dead, was preparing to leave when Simpson arrived, barely alive. Their story was later told in the book and documentary Touching the Void, highlighting the ethics and physical limits of mountaineering. Number 7. The Chilean miners, trapped underground. On August 5, 2010, a cave-in at the San Jose copper gold mine in northern Chile trapped 33 miners 2,300 feet underground. For 17 days, the miners were cut off from the outside world, surviving on limited rations of food and water stored in the mine. When rescuers finally located them, they were able to send supplies and establish communication. But it would take another 52 days to drill a hole large enough to bring the men to safety. During their time underground, the miners faced psychological stress, fear of further collapses, and uncertainty about their chances of survival. Their eventual rescue was a monumental feat of engineering and cooperation, watched by millions around the world. The story was later dramatized in the film The 33. Number 8. Mauro Prosperi, Lost in the Sahara. Mauro Prosperi, an experienced Italian runner, participated in the Marathon des Sables, a grueling 6-day race across the Sahara Desert, in 1994. However, on the 4th day, Prosperi was caught in a violent sandstorm and lost his way. For 9 days, he wandered through the desert with no water and little food. Prosperi survived by drinking his own urine, eating bats, and squeezing moisture from plants. Dehydrated, delirious, and on the brink of death, he stumbled upon an abandoned mosque, where he found some water and shelter. He was eventually found by a group of nomads, who helped him get to a nearby village where he was rescued. Prosperi's story is one of perseverance and survival in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Number 9. Ernest Shackleton, The Endurance Expedition. Sir Ernest Shackleton's Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition of 1914 to 1917 is one of the most epic survival stories in the history of exploration. Shackleton and his crew of 27 set out to cross the Antarctic continent, but their ship, the Endurance, became trapped in pack ice and was eventually crushed. The crew was stranded on the ice for months, surviving on limited rations and enduring the extreme cold. Shackleton led his men on a harrowing journey in lifeboats to reach the uninhabited Elephant Island, and from there, he and 5 others embarked on an 800-mile journey across the treacherous Southern Ocean in a small open boat to reach South Georgia Island. Once there, they had to cross the island's mountainous terrain to reach a whaling station. Despite the odds, all of Shackleton's men survived, thanks to his leadership and their unyielding spirit. Their story is detailed in Alfred Lansing's book Endurance, Shackleton's Incredible Voyage. Number 10. Poon Lim, 133 Days at Sea. Poon Lim, a Chinese sailor, was serving aboard a British merchant ship during World War I when it was torpedoed by a German U-boat in 1942. Lim survived the attack and managed to climb aboard a life raft with minimal supplies. For 133 days, he drifted in the South Atlantic, surviving on fish and rainwater he collected in a canvas tarp. He faced storms, sharks, and extreme isolation. Remarkably, Lim used his ingenuity to survive, fashioning a fishhook from a nail and creating a desalination device to obtain drinking water. He was finally rescued by Brazilian fishermen who found him near the coast of Brazil. Lim's story is a testament to human resourcefulness and the will to survive against overwhelming odds. Number 11. Beck Weathers, surviving Mount Everest. In 1996, a disastrous storm struck Mount Everest, leading to the deaths of 8 climbers in what became known as the 1996 Everest disaster. Among those caught in the storm was Dr. Beck Weathers, a Texan pathologist who was left for dead by his team after he fell unconscious and was severely frostbitten. Weathers miraculously regained consciousness after spending hours in the sub-zero temperatures. Despite being blind and suffering from severe frostbite, he managed to stagger back to Camp IV. His story of survival was one of the few positive outcomes of that tragic day, and was later recounted in John Krakauer's book Into Thin Air and the movie Everest. Number 12. Aaron Halstead, the stowaway survivor. In 1965, 12-year-old Aaron Halstead from California decided to run away from home. He sneaked aboard a plane at Los Angeles International Airport bound for the Hawaiian Islands, hiding in the wheel well of a Douglas DC-8. During the 5-hour flight at altitudes of up to 38,000 feet, Halstead was exposed to freezing temperatures and thin air. Remarkably, he survived the ordeal, suffering only frostbite and hypothermia. His survival in such extreme conditions was nothing short of a miracle, and it led to increased security measures at airports. Number 13. Harrison O'Kane, the underwater miracle. In 2013, Harrison O'Kane, a Nigerian cook, was the sole survivor of a shipwreck off the coast of Nigeria. The tugboat he was working on capsized and sank to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, trapping O'Kane in an air pocket in the ship's bathroom. For nearly 3 days, he survived in the pitch darkness, with no food and little water, while the temperature dropped dangerously low. His rescue by divers, who were sent to recover bodies, was captured on camera and became known as the underwater miracle. O'Kane's survival is one of the most remarkable underwater rescues ever recorded. Number 14. The Donner Party, a tale of desperation. The Donner Party was a group of American pioneers who set out for California in 1846, but became trapped by heavy snowfall in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Of the 87 members of the party, only 48 survived, and their story became infamous for the extreme measures they took to stay alive, including cannibalism. The survivors endured months of freezing temperatures, starvation, and isolation before being rescued. Their harrowing journey is a dark chapter in American history and has been the subject of numerous books and documentaries. Number 15. John McCain, a Peacock Dewey's survival. John McCain, a U.S. Navy pilot, was shot down over North Vietnam in 1967 during the Vietnam War. He was captured by the North Vietnamese and held as a prisoner of war for more than 5 years, enduring torture, solitary confinement, and inhumane conditions Despite his injuries, McCain refused early release, adhering to the military code of conduct. His resilience and determination to survive became a symbol of American courage. McCain's story of survival and his subsequent career in politics are chronicled in his memoir, Faith of My Fathers. Number 16. The Chelyabinsk meteor survivors. In 2013, a meteor exploded over the city of Chelyabinsk, Russia, releasing energy equivalent to 470 to 500 kilotons of TNT. The explosion caused extensive damage, shattering windows and injuring over 1,500 people. Despite the magnitude of the blast, there were no direct fatalities, thanks to quick thinking and the resilience of the city's residents. The Chelyabinsk event is a rare example of a modern-day meteor impact on a populated area and highlights the potential dangers posed by space debris. Number 17. Apollo 13. A successful failure. In 1970, the Apollo 13 mission to the Moon faced a critical situation when an oxygen tank exploded, crippling the spacecraft. The three astronauts aboard, Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Hayes, were forced to improvise with limited resources to stay alive and return to Earth. Their survival depended on their ability to adapt, as they had to conserve power, ration water, and use the lunar module as a lifeboat. Against all odds, they managed to return safely, with the mission being hailed as a successful failure. The story was later dramatized in the film Apollo 13. Number 18. Timothy Treadwell, the Grizzly Man. Timothy Treadwell, an American environmentalist, spent 13 summers living among the grizzly bears in Alaska's Katmai National Park. Treadwell believed he had a special bond with the bears and that they trusted him. However, in 2003, Treadwell and his girlfriend, Amy Huguenard, were attacked and killed by one of the bears he had spent years observing. Although Treadwell did not survive, his story of living with and studying grizzlies raised awareness about wildlife conservation. His life and tragic death were the subject of Werner Herzog's documentary Grizzly Man. Number 19. Louis Zamperini, A Life of Resilience. Louis Zamperini was an Olympic athlete and World War II bombardier whose story of survival is one of the most compelling of the 20th century. After his plane crashed into the Pacific Ocean in 1943, Zamperini and two crewmates survived on a life raft for 47 days, fending off sharks, starvation, and the scorching sun. They were eventually captured by the Japanese and subjected to brutal treatment as prisoners of war for more than 2 years. Zamperini's resilience and ability to forgive his captors after the war are chronicled in Laura Hillenbrand's best-selling book, Unbroken, and the subsequent film adaptation. Number 20. Alvarenga and Cordova. 438 days at sea. In November 2012, Salvador Alvarenga and Ezequiel Cordova, two fishermen from El Salvador, set out for a day of fishing in the Pacific Ocean. A storm pushed their small boat off course, leaving them adrift without power. For 438 days, they drifted across the Pacific Ocean, surviving on raw fish, seabirds, and rainwater. Cordova died after 4 months at sea, but Alvarenga managed to survive, eventually washing ashore on a remote atoll in the Marshall Islands. His story is one of the longest recorded instances of survival at sea. Number 21. Ricky Meiji, 71 days in the Australian outback. In 2006, Ricky Meiji was traveling through the Australian outback when his car broke down. Lost and stranded in one of the harshest environments on Earth, Meiji found himself alone, with no food or water. Over the next 71 days, he survived on a diet of frogs, leeches, grasshoppers, and plants. Meiji's ordeal was a testament to human survival instincts in a hostile environment. He lost over half his body weight and was on the brink of death when he was finally found by cattle station workers. His story, chronicled in his book Left for Dead, is a harrowing reminder of the dangers of the outback and the resilience required to survive there. Number 22. Douglas Mawson, the lone Antarctic survivor. Douglas Mawson, an Australian explorer, set out on an Antarctic expedition in 1912, but what began as a scientific mission turned into a desperate fight for survival. After losing his two companions and most of his supplies in a crevasse, Mawson was left alone in the harsh Antarctic environment. For over a month, he trekked across the frozen wasteland, battling extreme cold, starvation, and near blindness. Mawson's survival was due to his sheer determination and willpower. He finally reached base camp, emaciated and exhausted, but alive. Mawson's journey is one of the most remarkable survival stories in the history of exploration. Number 23. Yossi Ginsberg, lost in the Amazon. In 1981, Israeli adventurer Yossi Ginsberg embarked on a journey into the uncharted regions of the Bolivian Amazon. After being separated from his companions following a rafting accident, Ginsberg found himself alone in one of the most inhospitable environments on Earth. For 3 weeks, he wandered the jungle, surviving on fruits, insects, and whatever he could find. Ginsberg faced constant threats from wild animals, venomous snakes, and the relentless elements. His story of survival is not just about overcoming physical challenges, but also the psychological battle of maintaining hope in utter isolation. Ginsberg's ordeal was later recounted in his memoir Jungle and adapted into a film starring Daniel Radcliffe. Number 24. José Salvador Alvarenga, 438 Days Adrift. Salvadoran fisherman José Salvador Alvarenga's story is one of the longest survival ordeals ever recorded at sea. In November 2012, Alvarenga set out on a 2-day fishing trip off the coast of Mexico, but a storm pushed his small boat into the open ocean. With no way to navigate, Alvarenga drifted aimlessly for 438 days, surviving on a diet of raw fish, turtles, seabirds, and rainwater. His companion, Ezequiel Cordoba, succumbed to illness after 4 months, leaving Alvarenga completely alone. He eventually washed ashore on a remote atoll in the Marshall Islands, having traveled more than 6,700 miles. Alvarenga's survival is considered one of the most extraordinary tales of endurance and resilience in maritime history. Number 25. The crew of the whale ship Essex, inspiration for Moby Dick. The tragedy of the whale ship Essex inspired one of the greatest novels in American literature, Moby Dick. In 1820, the Essex was rammed by a sperm whale in the Pacific Ocean, causing the ship to sink. The 20-man crew was left stranded in 3 small whaleboats with limited supplies and thousands of miles from land. Over the course of 90 days, the men faced starvation, dehydration, and the harshness of the open ocean. In their desperation, they resorted to cannibalism, with only 8 crew members surviving by the time they were rescued. The ordeal of the Essex is a stark reminder of the dangers faced by seafarers in the age of whaling. Number 26. The 33 Chilean miners, trapped for 69 days. In August 2010, 33 miners became trapped 2,300 feet underground when the San Jose mine in northern Chile collapsed. For the first 17 days, the men had no contact with the outside world and survived on a limited supply of food and water. After being discovered alive, a massive international effort was launched to rescue them. For 69 days, the miners endured the darkness, heat, and psychological strain of being entombed underground. The rescue operation, which was broadcast live, captivated the world and became a symbol of hope and human resilience. All 33 miners were eventually brought to the surface in a specially designed capsule in a dramatic and emotional rescue. Number 27. Diana Nyad, swimming from Cuba to Florida. At the age of 64, Diana Nyad became the first person to swim from Cuba to Florida without a shark cage. covering 110 miles of open ocean. Naiad had attempted the swim 4 times before finally succeeding in 2013. During her 53-hour swim, she faced jellyfish stings, strong currents, and extreme fatigue. Naiad's determination and physical endurance were extraordinary, and her accomplishment is a testament to the power of perseverance. Her achievement inspired millions and demonstrated that age is no barrier to achieving one's dreams. Number 28. Joe Simpson and Simon Yates. British climbers Joe Simpson and Simon Yates set out to scale the previously unclimbed west face of Ciudad Grande in the Peruvian Andes. After successfully reaching the summit, Simpson suffered a serious injury when he fell and broke his leg. Yates attempted to lower Simpson down the mountain using ropes, but in a desperate situation, he was forced to cut the rope when Simpson slipped over a cliff, believing his friend had fallen to his death. Miraculously, Simpson survived the fall and spent 3 days crawling back to base camp with no food or water. Yates was preparing to leave when Simpson arrived, barely alive. Their story, told in the book and documentary Touching the Void, explores the limits of human endurance and the complex moral decisions climbers must face. Number 29. Sir Ernest Shackleton. From there, Shackleton and a small crew embarked on an 800-mile journey in a small open boat to South Georgia Island, where they sought help from a whaling station. All 28 men of the Endurance survived, thanks to Shackleton's leadership and their collective will to endure. The expedition is considered one of the greatest survival stories in the history of exploration. Number 30. Mauled by a bear. Grizzly bear. Glass was severely mauled, suffering multiple injuries, including a broken leg and deep lacerations. His companions, believing he would not survive, left him behind with minimal supplies. But Glass refused to die. He crawled more than 200 miles through the wilderness, surviving on wild berries and the occasional carcass. Caprio. Number 31. Beck Weathers. Despite suffering from severe frostbite and blindness due to high altitude, Weathers miraculously regained consciousness and managed to stagger back to Camp IV. His survival was one of the few positive outcomes of that tragic day and is chronicled in John Krakauer's book Into Thin Air and the film Everest. Number 32. Jim Thompson. The disappearance of the Silk King. Jim Thompson, an American businessman known as the Silk King of Thailand, disappeared in the Malaysian jungle in 1967 under mysterious circumstances. Thompson, who had revitalized the Thai silk industry, was last seen taking a walk near the Cameron Highlands. Despite extensive search efforts, no trace of him was ever found, and his fate remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of the 20th century. Thompson's disappearance has fueled numerous theories, ranging from foul play to a deliberate decision to vanish, but the truth remains elusive. Number 33. Tammy Oldham Ashcraft. Adrift in the Pacific. In 1983, Tammy Oldham Ashcraft and her fiancé, Richard Sharp, were sailing from Tahiti to San Diego when they encountered a Category 4 hurricane. Their boat was capsized and Sharp was swept overboard, leaving Ashcraft alone in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. With the boat severely damaged and her navigation equipment destroyed, Ashcraft was forced to navigate by the stars and ration what little food and water she had. For 41 days, she battled the elements, depression, and the physical challenges of surviving alone at sea. Her incredible journey of survival and resilience was later recounted in her memoir, Red Sky and Morning, and adapted into the film Adrift. Number 34. The Gremlin Special. Surviving a World War II plane crash. During World War II, a U.S. Army Air Corps aircraft, known as the Gremlin Special, crashed in the jungles of New Guinea. The plane was carrying 24 people, including 9 members of a sightseeing trip to see the remote tribes of the island. Miraculously, 3 passengers survived the crash, but were stranded in one of the most remote and inaccessible parts of the world. For over 47 days, the survivors, including Corporal Margaret Hastings, endured the hostile environment, battling injuries, tropical diseases, and the threat of hostile tribes. Their rescue, which involved an extraordinary airlift operation, is one of the most remarkable stories of survival from the war. Number 35. Paul Templar, surviving a hippo attack. Paul Templar was a river guide leading a group of tourists down the Zambezi River in Zimbabwe when he was attacked by a hippopotamus, one of Africa's most dangerous animals. The hippo capsized his kayak and attacked Templar, pulling him underwater and mauling him repeatedly. Despite suffering severe injuries, including the loss of an arm, Templar managed to escape and was rescued by his colleagues. His survival against one of nature's most aggressive creatures is a testament to his willpower and determination. Templar later recounted his ordeal in his memoir, What's Left of Me. Number 36. The female Robinson Crusoe. Living alone on the island for 2 years, Blackjack's survival skills, learned from her Inuit heritage, enabled her to endure the harsh Arctic environment until she was rescued. Her story, often overshadowed by the tragic failure of the expedition, is a remarkable tale of resilience and survival. Number 37. The Miracle of the Andes. The survivors were left stranded in freezing temperatures with little food and no hope of immediate rescue. Faced with starvation, they made the harrowing decision to eat the bodies of those who had died in the crash. Number 38. The Forgotten Heroes. Despite these hardships, the men continued their mission, laying the depots as planned, though several members of the party perished. The survivors endured months of extreme cold, starvation, and isolation before being rescued. Number 39. The Miracle of the Andes. The story of their survival, bravery, and the eventual rescue of the remaining 16 survivors after 2 of them made a perilous trek across the mountains to find help is one of the most harrowing and inspirational tales of endurance ever recorded. Name. Number 40. The Stranded Teenagers of Tristan da Cunha. In 1961, a volcanic eruption forced the evacuation of the tiny island of Tristan da Cunha in the South Atlantic. Among the evacuees were 5 teenage boys who had been sent to the uninhabited neighboring island of Inaccessible to catch birds for food. If you enjoyed from this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe our channel for future interesting videos. Thanks for watching.